Siege is more popular than ever right now, and that's crazy. I've been playing Siege since the beta in 2015, almost 10 years ago now, and the game has obviously changed a lot since then. Many of the changes were good, like adding new characters, maps, and gadgets, but some were just confusing. Actually, a lot of the changes were confusing. Has Siege changed too much? So there was a low moment in Siege's history that I would say started with year 6 and went through year 7 and 8. I just realized I didn't play Siege at all in year 8, actually. That's crazy because I used to play the game all the time. But I had this constant feeling that Siege was going to abruptly end during this time. Like we were just going to get an announcement, probably one season away that the game's no longer going to get updated and ranked was probably going to end, something like that. And the reason why was because it felt like the game got progressively worse each update, and the player base was clearly leaving. But suddenly, it seems like everyone is coming back. And I think a large part of that is because of streamers and YouTubers going back to it first. But a lot of people also like this most recent update, so definitely can't discount that. But I say that because the game is almost unrecognizable from what it used to be. It seems like every little thing about the game has been changed. Not necessarily for the worse, but rarely for the better. Like, maps have all been altered, almost every operator has been significantly changed, whether it's their movement speed, their loadout, sometimes even full gadget reworks. The way attachments on guns has been altered, the color of gadgets and cameras have been altered several times for some reason. Recoil was changed, shields just got changed, the pinging system is completely different and makes spotting rarely the right move, which is kind of just a weird dynamic. The setup phase is different, deploying gadgets is different. There's some odd plot to the game now that has basically changed the entire setting and is really just stupid. Now, there's actually a really good video on how stupid the lore is. Whoever thought this was a good idea, you're wrong. For this latest update, they basically brought in a character to completely change the lore, but then they didn't really. He comes in and is like, y'all are basically just like an airsoft team now. Lame. But then he becomes one of them. I don't get it. And yeah, all of these changes have a potential purpose. And some of them were good changes even. But when you look into that potential, you realize that some of these changes were made just for the sake of changing the game. The most obvious example is balancing. Siege does this great thing where they publish a lot of data about the game, but with the one I look at the most being the performance of operators. For a time, this was the basis of justifying balancing changes. If an operator was overused or overperforming, they'd get nerfed. If an operator was underused or underperforming, they get buffed. It was pretty much that simple, and it made a lot of sense. But then we started seeing underperforming operators getting nerfed, and overperforming operators getting buffed. And yeah, it all just went out the window, I guess. Another obvious example is the balance between attacking and defending. Defending has been statistically more likely to win on almost every map since the game released. I think the original Favela was the one exception. This creates an issue as the number of rounds are uneven, meaning whichever team is defending an extra round has a slight advantage. So what has Siege done? Nerf attackers regularly. Redesign maps to favor defenders. Give defenders more counters to attackers. The one big advantage attackers have gotten over the years is that they can now change their operator during the setup phase. But that's just made certain operators useless. That's really not a good balancing change. Like, why play Bandit Arcade if you're just gonna get countered by any mildly competent team? And the attackers don't have to preemptively bring counters like they used to. It used to be a thing that your team pretty much had to bring a Thatcher or a Cali or someone like that, because the alternative was not being able to hard breach, and hard breaching statistically improved your chances of winning. But now, you may as well just play all fraggers and roamers with this because, maybe one hard breacher, but that's pretty much all you need now. If you bring like any sort of like utility character, you're basically just wasting your loadout because then they're just gonna bring a counter that probably has a better loadout, like if you bring Cade, it's like, congrats. Now they have a Twitch or a Thatcher probably. Like, how exactly did that help you again? You slowed them down a tiny bit? You could have just played someone with better guns. Probably would have helped you more. But I think these changes are actually why I stayed away from the game for a while. I'd come back to the game and it'd be like, okay, yeah, at first everything looks really familiar. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play the game. And then you're like mid-round, just like, wait, is that my camera or is that their camera? Why is it that color? That is a completely different color from the color scheme I've ever seen before. Or why, when I try to deploy a gadget, does it do this? Or, it's just There's always like something that kind of just throws a wrench into coming back, and it's like, this just doesn't feel right. It just feels weirdly different for no real reason. You know, or you go to play a character and they're just like significantly worse than they used to be, and you're really not sure why, because it's not like they were a particularly good character. You know, weird stuff like that. You know, like if you actually look at the stats for the characters, you'll see that Ash has been pretty much the best performing and most overpicked character since the game came out. And the defenders are a bit more varied. You know, for the longest time, it was Jaeger was just always the best by far. But I feel like if a character's overpicked, but they're not over underperforming, then that means they're actually in a good spot. Because that means that you would basically have the most data on them out of all of the characters, and the data is showing that they're balanced. You know, in comparison, you have characters like Finka, who aren't normally picked the most, but very, very consistently overperform. Because they just give a universal buff. Like, they just buff the whole team. They can revive people from across the map. Finka is a very strong character. Like, people just don't think she's that fun, I think, is the biggest reason people don't play as her. But that doesn't mean that she needs to be buffed. Like, if anything, it's the other way around. Maybe nerf her, but give her something to make her playstyle a little more fun, I don't know. Like, there's just so many options, and they always go with the weirdest ones, it seems like. And then, yeah, just, like, the general, like, lore of it all is getting, like, really weird. Going back to, like, the original operators, like, Pulse is sci-fi, for sure. But then you compare that to, like, more recent operators, and it's like, nah. Yeah, Pulse's sci-fi is, like, believable, almost. Like, you could see that maybe a top-secret organization would have something like Pulse's gadget in real life, and just not have it disclosed to the public. But then you have all these people with, like, holograms, and just like, what is going on again? What year is this? Also, I still think it's crazy that they reworked Tachanka and he's still, like, one of the most underperforming, underpicked characters. Like, I get why Tachanka was reworked. Staying still is a pretty horrible idea in this game, but I feel like Tachanka had some legitimate strategies that people just really didn't consider. You know, for example, window peeking. You know, some people don't like it, but it's a prominent thing in, like, higher level play. And something cool that you could do with original Tachanka was window peek with a turret, with a shield. Just think about how helpful that could be. You're no longer trading with people out the window, you know, because when it comes into higher level play, like, they already know you're out the window, so it's basically just a trade a lot of the times. But if you have a shield there and they don't know your plan, you win. And yeah, his redesign's probably more useful overall. You know, having area effect damage, basically area denial, can be very useful. You know, there's a reason why pros like smoke. But yeah, anyways, my big point here is what people really want isn't for them to go in and change every little thing about the game. It's to add new content. Like, if you can add all of these cosmetics and make all of these changes to the game, you could definitely be adding more content than you are by simply not doing all of that. But I don't know, I'm not even good at this game anymore, so. And there's the whole changes to the rank system, which I do not like. I do not like starting at the very bottom and just grinding to get to the top. That is not fun. With the placements, I understand sometimes you get some bad luck and it would put you, you know, a bit lower than you would normally be in, but it's so much better than just starting from the bottom and grinding to get to the top. Because now it's like, in Copper, you can encounter anybody. You know, you'll encounter people who, you know, could be like of the highest skill, but they're just haven't played this season, you know? Whereas, like, in the past, if you did good in your placement matches, you'd just be immediately placed in gold. And I understand that there is some balancing so that, you know, if you are bad and you're in Copper, you're not going to be placed with the people who are good and in Copper and are ranking up quicker. Still, it's like, it's a grind to go anywhere, which makes it to where I don't actually care. You know, like, being a high rank is less impressive now because it's less skill. I mean, there is still a lot of skill involved, but it's less skill and a lot more just time you put into it. And, like, who cares? Like, I don't care that you put, like, 1,000 hours in this season. Like, that doesn't impress anybody. That's not an achievement. It's, if anything, it's the opposite of one. But so it basically means that your rank, you know, if you're copper or gold, whatever, just shows how much time you actually put into the game. Whereas your actual, like, skill level, which is what used to decide rank, isn't shown anywhere. So it's a secret. And it's like, who actually wants that change? I don't understand who would want it. Like, I feel like the only people who it benefits are people who play the game a lot but don't get any better. Which I don't know why you would deserve rewards for that. I mean, my only guess is maybe that kind of person is most likely to buy battle passes because intelligence reasons. I just don't even know what they're doing with a lot of this. But at the end of the day, it's still a pretty fun game. I kind of think that they should probably just move on to a Siege sequel. I know that the original developers didn't ever want a sequel, but they also left the team entirely. But there's just like little things I missed, like the balance between like what guns had ACOG and what guns didn't. You know, which operators had ACOG and which operators didn't. You know, things like that that made things really interesting, I feel like, back in the day. Whereas now it's like every operator can have any attachment they want. That's not even considered in balancing anymore, which was more of a buff to stronger operators than it was to weaker operators. Considering that the weaker operators typically had the better attachments anyways, because, I mean, that was a way to balance the game that they just got rid of, and further dividing the balance in the game. Which I understand, you know, every operator having every attachment makes it a little bit easier if you're newer to the game to kind of understand things, but, I mean, if it messes up the balance, like, is it really that helpful to newer players? Because then they're just like, well, why is this character so much worse than all the others? I don't know. I just have so many questions about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, the game's still a fun game to play. What do you think? Do you think they changed too much in Siege? Or do you think they should actually be making more changes, maybe? Or do you think they've done just the right amount of changes? Or maybe you think that they're making too many bad changes and not enough good changes, you know, something like that. You know, let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you want to see more from me, subscribe. And yeah, see ya.
You could have just played someone with better guns.